Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Eleanor. Thank you for joining me again. Thank you especially to Annovella and Bibliosophie for welcoming me back to the YouTube channel after a year and a half's break. I really appreciate your support. Also, thank you to Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Reads. I had a fascinating conversation with her in the comments about my deep dive into Parade, and I so much admire and thank Lindy for reaching out in that way. It meant a great deal to me. So, getting into this book, spoiler alert, I loved it. Loved it, highly recommend it. However, I should mention, if you're a first-time poetry reader, it will present some challenges to you. It did for me, and it's not the kind of book that you can skim. And it's certainly a book with several layers and several complexities, but that is all the better. It's all the better for it. It's also highly entertaining. Now, I will link to a video that the poet herself stars in, that the Metropolitan Museum of Art made for the book. Robyn Schiff is shown walking through several rooms of the Met and talking about her experiences when she was working in the information desk for many years, when she was a younger poet, when she was studying in Manhattan. Now, the book itself is set up in 3 parts, and in between each part, there is a standalone poem about a wasp. It's hard to really summarize what this book does, but to me, the moment when this book became very interesting was about halfway through on page 55. And I'll read you this bit. In honor of NASA's announcement this morning of the discovery of water on the sunlit surface of the moon, I just ran down the stairs to share the shimmering news with Nick. Found him asleep on the couch. What day is it? October 26, 2020, 2 p.m. A blue moon is rising on Halloween, a few days from today. And the day after that, daylight saving ends, marking the beginning of the winter period of the squandering of sacred darkness, and next Tuesday, Election Day in America. As good a time as any to confess I don't know what to do. Now, you'll probably say to yourself, what does that at all have to do with the Met? And also, why is it even interesting? Well, it's interesting because I'm a Bernadette Mayer fan. Bernadette Mayer was an incredible American poet, and one of my favorite poems of hers is called Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And this is Bernadette Mayer. I'm going to jump from section to section just so you see the similarities. Moon out and no snow yet, November 1st, the first anniversary of our wedding and the day before Election Day, 1976. Yesterday was Halloween. Next Friday I have an appointment with the dentist, and the following Tuesday is Lewis's 32nd birthday. And a little bit further in the poem. The day before yesterday, we turned the clocks back 1 hour, which made it seem like every day will have an extra hour in it, not only of darkness, but of just plain time. Now, you hear the similarities, and I immediately knew that Robyn Schiff, who's a professor of poetry, is tipping her hat to Bernadette Mayer. And that is really something that for me encapsulates almost everything that's happening in this incredible book. Because as Robyn Schiff, as the protagonist of this epic, is discussing the many works of art in the Metropolitan, there is a consistent theme of association and disassociation between the different artists, between different time periods, between the idea of what is authentic and what is inauthentic, and the tradition that we have within the art world, and the way it mirrors other traditions we may have within society, whether it be a prejudice, positive or negative traditions. You have prejudices, you have stereotypes. The narrator engages with all of these different marginalized ways of looking at art and marginalized artists. And to take that a step further, what I particularly enjoyed, although I enjoyed so many things in this book, is the way she's able to maneuver herself around one of the elephants in the room, which, one of many of the Metropolitan, which is that you're really seeing art made by men and critiqued by men, and the men are often depicting women. And she, as a woman who was working in the information desk, also came across prejudice against women, from her colleagues. Probably today you wouldn't get quite that same misogyny, such blatant misogyny, but then again, who knows? And how she does that is not by embracing the binary of men versus women, not at all. What she does is, in the most subtle way that will probably go over most readers' heads, and it did through mine until I, did a bit of research, is that she's tipping her hat to a tradition of female poets that she feels are her mentors, whether they were alive or not within her lifetime. And she's doing that by using particular form and also by using particular allusions within the book of poetry. Now, I happen to know Bernadette Meyer, and it meant so much to me to see that she's doing that. She's taking a part of herself, putting it in her book, which means that she's putting it into the Met. And she's also dragging with her Bernadette Meyer and saying, here, you go here too. You belong here too. And it was only when I then did a bit more research that I discovered that she was doing the same with two of my favorite poets who I still, even though they're my favorite poets, I still didn't see what she was doing until an incredible intellectual and writer pointed it out. And I will leave a link to the Los Angeles Review of Books article by Heather Cass White. Thank you, Heather Cass White, from the bottom of my heart for your review of this book titled A Quiver with Significance. Now, I didn't know this, but Heather Cass White is a scholar of a poet called Maryann Moore, who you probably have heard of, but haven't perhaps read her books. Now, I didn't know, but Heather Cass White came out with new collected poems by Maryann Moore. If you want to purchase the collected works of Maryann Moore, purchase this. I purchased several others, and they're fine. They're absolutely fine. But this one is so is so much more readable, and I won't go into that. You can research why. It's just so much better. But in any case, so I'm reading this article, and I'm not expecting really anything of much significance. And suddenly she points out that actually this entire book is a homage to both Elizabeth Bishop and Maryann Moore. And if you will look at the actual way that the actual form of this poem It looks exactly like a Maryann Moore poem. I still didn't see it. I still didn't see that in honor of Maryann Moore, following in her footsteps, is a way of showing this solidarity between female poets and also just doing what she wants to do, frankly, I'm sure. She's counting syllables. She's counting syllables, and the only poet who's ever done that is Maryann Moore. And it's all very well, in Parade, for Rachel Cusk to go on and on about how boohoo, women are hard done by. But there's something to be said for just going out there, doing your art, writing your poetry, and using the previous women writers' ways and traditions that are uniquely theirs. So thanks to this article I read, I realized that Robyn Schiff is counting syllables here. So every stanza has approximately the same number of syllables. According to an interview I saw with Robyn Schiff, she actually says, yes, not only did she do that, but she also chose, because she was writing the poem through many different years, she would most of the time choose the number of syllables for each stanza depending on her age. So some are 46 and some are 48. And again, how amazing for a female poet to actually present her age in this subtle way. Absolutely thrilling to me. But the 3 wasp poems are written in exactly the way Maryann Moore would write, which is each stanza has the same number of lines, and each line in each stanza has the same number of lines as the other one. So the first stanza, first line might have 9 syllables. The second stanza's first line, the third stanza's first line, etc. will all have 9 syllables as well. This pleases me no end. And then, of course, Cass White brings up this idea, which I had been ignorant of. The idea of the wasp as being a theme that is found, an image that is found in both Maryann Moore's poetry and Elizabeth Bishop's. And now you have to remember that, well, you don't have to remember, but it's fun to remember that Elizabeth Bishop was significantly younger than Maryann Moore, and Maryann Moore was her mentor. They adored each other, but, Maryann Moore helped Elizabeth Bishop come up. And Maryann Moore herself was trying to use ideas and pathways that were created by Maryann Moore. Elizabeth Bishop was trying to use them and also trying to distance herself from them, which is what you do from generation to generation. Just as we have the stories that we all know of men who follow in the footsteps of other male poets, here we have a female writer working today who is extravagantly and joyfully doing the same. And I will leave links below to the main poems that refer to wasps by Moore and Bishop. And I know that you will get much more then once you read the intriguing wasp poems by Robyn Schiff. Finally, I'd like to bring up something that was the biggest takeaway for me from this book, amongst many, and it wasn't what I've just been talking about, even though you can see I'm so excited by it. In Information Desk, Robyn Schiff is describing, thrillingly, many objects, many works of art. And though she puts herself in the work, and you do get a sense of her personality and a few tidbits about her family, as Bernadette did, and hence the connection. There is there is something about the taking the magnifying glass as a poet and going up very, very close to objects and describing them. And that is what Maryann Moore is famous for, and Bishop as well. And I went back to a book on my shelf, which I've had for years. This is, I think, the third time I've reread it. And every time I read it, I'll leave a link. It's by Toibin, who's an amazing writer about poetry, as well as a novelist himself. And one thing that he wrote here, page 3 of his book, he writes, "Writing for Bishop was not self-expression." And this to me is the biggest takeaway, because I think for Robyn Schiff, Elizabeth Bishop, Maryann Moore, they don't come to poetry with the idea that they're going to write about how sad they are or how happy they are. They actually come to objects and to nature as well. And they maybe look at nature, parts of nature, as objects. Yes, now that I think about it, they look at nature, and you can see that happening with the wasps with Schiff, and of course you can, if you read Bishop and Moore, you'll see it instantly. And they try to observe very, very carefully. They're observing something that is completely separate from their own ego. And they begin to write with that in mind. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not putting themselves in the poem. On the contrary. And that also doesn't mean that they're not also thinking about their own experiences and sharing that with their readers. It just means that their jumping off point is not themselves. Their jumping off point is an observation of something else. And I find this extraordinarily exciting and liberating, because I'm living in a generation of poets that rarely does that. And it's very, very refreshing. So with that being said, I'll go and link all of these references for you. I really hope that you'll read this book. I so much recommend it. And I'd love to have discussions if you want to do that in the comments. But I'm really here just to get out my excitement. I also, if you're still here, then let me also recommend that you look at an upcoming booktube prompt in September that's been started by a group of 5 wonderful booktubers, one of them being Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Reads. And I'll leave a link to her particular video that's talking about the prompt, which is called Framed, to read at least one book in the month of September that's about art. This may very well be the book that you'd want to read. I highly recommend it. And that might mean that I get a chance to see what other people think of this book. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm so delighted to be back on BookTube. And don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind. Bye-bye.